You signed a written contract with a vendor. A different company still holds a key that acts as you. The invoice names the firm you reviewed. That firm already depends on a supplier you never named. And that supplier can hold a certificate, a token, or a build path that a rail, a doorway, or a build will treat as the institution speaking. The review that stamped last year's purchase order does not watch a grant you never recorded. The vendor you never signed still has a key because fourth-party risk is the supplier of your supplier. You never signed them. They can still act as you. The invoice names a firm. The rail already accepts a hop that was never on that invoice. Third-party risk management, TPRM, does not erase imported failure. A company that uses other companies will import some of their failures. The work is to keep that failure inside the board's appetite, which means naming the hops, not only naming the firms on the invoice. The hop can be a subcontractor, an open-source maintainer, a cloud region, or a licensed technology provider that your bank never named on the purchase order. You may never have reviewed that node. The node can still move your money, your code, or your identity. The data or the debit that moved was still yours. You never signed them because intake records the company on the invoice, and the invoice records a signature, not a chain. The invoice names the integrator. The integrator already depends on a cloud, a certificate authority, a messaging bus, and sometimes another licensed pipe. Each hop adds a trust object you did not enroll. A written contract with the name on the purchase order cannot bind a firm that is not a party to that document. The hop does not ask your permission a second time. A certificate, a token, or a build path acts as you when the next system treats the message as the institution speaking. An institutional certificate is a signed identity a rail accepts as the bank itself. An API token is a machine password a doorway already accepts. A build path is the pipeline that signs and ships code your systems will install because the source looks trusted. You can delegate the act. You cannot delegate the impact. The signature on the purchase order is not the signature on the grant. Those hops stay hidden while the map is a list of signatures. They become visible when the map is a graph of keys. A vendor list is one column of names you signed. A graph is nodes and edges. Nodes are the firms, the clouds, and the rails. Edges are who can speak, on which rail, with which certificate, into which account, on behalf of whom. The list comforts a purchase order. The graph names a path. TPRM that inventories names and skips edges will keep passing reviews while a grant you never signed still acts as you. Edges are the attack surface. Nodes are only the places those edges land. A complete list of vendors can sit beside an open edge, because the list counts companies and the surface counts grants. If 3 of your critical vendors sit on one hidden platform, you do not have 3 independent bets. You have one bet with 3 invoices. 3 signatures on one unsigned key is still one key. An aggregation point is a node many of your vendors or many of your peers already share. A payment service technology provider that several banks use is an aggregation point. A single identity broker used by a whole sector is an aggregation point. A single cloud control plane under a popular SaaS tool is an aggregation point. Aggregation is efficient for operations. Aggregation is a multiplier for an attacker, because one stolen grant reaches a set, not a singleton. Efficiency and blast radius are the same drawing. The drawing looks like savings in a budget meeting. The drawing looks like a sector incident when the grant is abused. One-to-many blast is what aggregation produces on a bad week. One provider can reach many client institutions. Many reserve accounts can move on the same grant. Many honest payments stop when the pipe is cut. The geometry is why a medium-sized technology vendor can outrank a large but isolated supplier on a serious tiering board. Size of the purchase order is not size of the blast. The unsigned key outranks the signed cafeteria. The geometry is easier to hold when it has a public rail, and Brazil's Pix system is that rail. Pix is Brazil's instant payment system. Settlement runs in seconds through a rail overseen by the Central Bank of Brazil. Licensed institutions often connect through a payment service technology provider that holds institutional certificates and API channels so it can send orders on behalf of client institutions. On June 30, 2025, C&M Software, a central bank authorized provider, was compromised. Public reporting described attackers using valid institutional certificates and the matching private keys to issue protocol-correct Pix orders. The speaker was a speaker the rail already accepted. Client institutions had signed a path to the rail. They had not signed the attacker. The key still spoke as them. The mechanism is delegated trust on a shared pipe, not a smashed perimeter. Client institutions had already handed the provider the right to speak. Attackers who held those certificates could debit reserve accounts at more than one client institution because the pipe was shared. Public estimates for the movement sit around 800 million rias, with some recovery later reported. Treat that figure as a public estimate, not as a courtroom total. If later reporting moves the total, keep the mechanism. The teaching point does not depend on the last digit. The teaching point is that a valid grant moved money at rail speed for more than one client at once. The Central Bank of Brazil suspended C&M Software's connection. That decision cut the abused path. It also halted honest Pix traffic for every client institution on that same pipe. Revocation is not free. The control that stops the attacker can stop the honest payment the grocer is waiting on. Concentration turns a security decision into an availability decision for every customer who shared the provider. Boards like the sentence that says we can cut them off. Cutting them off is a real control. It is also an outage for every customer still on that certificate, that token, or that pipe. A graph earns its keep only when it changes what you name, what you enroll, and what you can revoke without guessing. Name the hop before the incident. Ask which fourth parties sit under each critical vendor. Ask which of those hops already hold a certificate, a token, or a build path that acts as you. Ask which of those hops are aggregation points that several of your vendors already share. A program that cannot name the hop cannot revoke the hop, and a program that cannot revoke the hop does not manage the surface. The unsigned key stays unsigned until someone writes it on the graph. The question to ask before the incident is not whether revocation exists on paper. The question is how fast you can revoke, what honest work dies in the same minute, and whether a second path exists that was tested. A revoke plan that has never been rehearsed is a hope. A second path that has never carried a payment is a drawing. Put the certificate into identity and access management, which is the system that grants, reviews, and revokes keys. If the key sits only in a folder for the written contract, it is not managed. The written contract names the firm you signed. Identity and access management names the grant you can take back. The map is a graph, not a list, because edges are the surface. Aggregation turns one stolen grant into a set. The Pix case showed a valid certificate on a shared pipe. When the central bank cut that pipe, honest traffic died with the abused path. Name the hop before the next review. Rehearse the revoke before you need it. Fund a second path if honest work cannot die in the same minute. Thank you.